Ethan had never been the kind of man who ran from his problems. But after the ink dried on his divorce papers and the apartment they'd once shared was stripped of every trace of warmth, he found himself unable to sleep, to eat, to breathe without feeling like the walls were collapsing inward. That's when he stumbled upon the listing. Secluded cabin, no neighbors, no Wi-Fi, pure silence. It felt less like a vacation offer and more like a lifeline. He packed a single duffel bag, grabbed a week's worth of groceries, and left the city without telling a soul where he was going. The drive stretched endlessly, winding through mountain roads, each turn peeling him further away from civilization. As the sun dipped behind the treetops, the asphalt gave way to gravel, then dirt. His GPS lost signal 10 miles before he found the cabin, which stood at the end of a forgotten path, surrounded by towering pines and silence so complete it rang in his ears. The place was smaller than he'd imagined, just one floor, with a slanted roof and a crooked porch swing that creaked in the breeze. But it was perfect. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of pine and old paper. Dust danced in beams of light that filtered through the heavy curtains. The furniture was rustic but clean, with a stone fireplace and a small bookshelf filled with old paperbacks. He found a notebook on the coffee table, the Guestbook. A nice touch from the owners. Curious, he opened it. The first few pages were typical. Cheerful notes about peaceful weekends, thanks for the quiet, a sketch of the trees. But then he flipped to the last entry and froze. The handwriting was sharp, almost rushed, but unmistakably his. His name, Ethan, signed at the bottom of a paragraph he didn't remember writing. The date? 2 weeks from today. He blinked, shook his head, read it again. "This has to be a joke," he muttered, but there was no laughter in his voice, no cameras, no signs of tampering. He checked the pages before and after, hoping for a clue, but the ink was dry and the page felt old. His heart beat louder in the silence. "Maybe someone else has my name," he told himself. Maybe. But deep down, it didn't feel like coincidence. It felt like a warning. Still, he shrugged it off and unpacked. The cabin was quiet, the bed surprisingly comfortable. He lit the fireplace, made a cup of tea, and tried to read. But the Guestbook sat on the table like it was watching him. He flipped it shut and turned it face down. That night, he heard a knock at the window. Just once. But when he looked, there was no one there. The next morning, Ethan woke to a disorienting quiet. No birdsong, no wind, just a thick, unnatural stillness pressing against the windows like fog. He had hoped to feel rested after his first night in the cabin, but instead, he felt hollow, like something had been taken from him in his sleep. He made coffee and tried to laugh at himself. "You're being dramatic," he muttered, standing barefoot on the wooden floor, steam rising from the chipped mug in his hand. But the joke didn't land. Nothing did. He stepped outside to clear his head. The forest loomed on all sides, beautiful and oppressive. He listened hard, hoping for the rustle of squirrels or the caw of distant crows, but there was nothing. Just the creak of that damn porch swing moving in a wind he couldn't feel. He sat there for a long time, staring into the woods until something caught his eye. A shape, a shadow maybe, standing far between the trees. Too far to make out clearly, but just close enough to seem human. He blinked, and it was gone. He told himself it was a tree, a trick of light, the echo of his own unease. Still, he went back inside and locked the door behind him. That afternoon, he explored the cabin more carefully. There were no cameras, no secret doors, nothing out of place. But in the drawer beneath the Guestbook, he found a photograph. It was old, creased at the corners, with muted colors faded by time. 4 people stood in front of the cabin, 2 men and 2 women, all smiling stiffly, One of them was Ethan, or at least someone who looked exactly like him. His heart dropped. He flipped the photo over. Nothing written. The faces were all unfamiliar, except for his own. The same jawline, same eyes, same scar above the left brow he'd gotten falling off a bike when he was 10. He tried to convince himself it was a coincidence, a long-lost relative maybe, but the timeline didn't add up. The clothes looked modern. He looked exactly the way he did now. He placed the photo face down next to the guest book. He needed air. He needed answers. He drove 20 minutes down the gravel road toward where his phone had last picked up service. No signal, just more trees, more silence. He drove further, but the road seemed longer than before. When he finally reached the gas station he'd passed on the way in, the attendant said they'd never seen him before, that no one had rented a cabin out that way in years. "You sure it's still standing?" the man asked, raising an eyebrow. "Last I heard, it burned down a while back." Ethan didn't respond. He just turned, got in his car, and drove back. Faster this time. The cabin was still there, waiting. But when he opened the door, the guest book was gone. Ethan sat in the doorway of the cabin, the threshold between two unrealities. A world that had stopped making sense outside, and one inside that was changing without explanation. He stared at the empty coffee table where the guest book had been, trying to slow his breathing, to think rationally. Maybe he had misplaced it. Maybe he hadn't seen it at all. Maybe stress, solitude, and lack of sleep were playing tricks on his memory. But the space it had occupied was unmistakable. A clean square in the dust, a ghost imprint of something undeniably real. He turned his attention back to the photograph. The longer he looked at the version of himself in that picture, the less convinced he became that it was just a look-alike. The posture, the way the head tilted slightly forward when he smiled, even the wrinkle at the corner of his eye, it was him. And yet, he had no memory of ever being here before. What haunted him wasn't just that the man looked like him, but that he looked familiar. Not like a stranger, more like a memory trying to crawl back into place. He went outside and circled the cabin, trying to find anything. A tool shed, a hatch, a clue. The trees seemed denser than before, their trunks packed tighter, like the forest was slowly creeping in. He checked the back, where a woodpile sat in perfect arrangement, too perfect for a place supposedly abandoned. Beneath one of the logs, he found a matchbook. It had a logo on it, the Hollow Pine Inn. He pocketed it. That name meant nothing to him, but the handwriting inside the matchbook, a hastily scrawled room number, did. It was his. Back inside, he rifled through the kitchen drawers. Behind a row of old utensils, he found a folded map. The edges were worn, almost brittle, and a red X was drawn over the location of the cabin. Another X, smaller and lighter, was marked at a distance deeper into the woods. He stared at it for a long time. Something about the shape of the lines, the way they curved, looked oddly familiar, like he'd traced them before. He folded the map and stuffed it into his jacket. If the answers weren't in the cabin, maybe they were out there. As he packed a flashlight and a water bottle, he heard it again, the knock. This time it came from the back door, firm, deliberate, not the wind, not a branch. He froze, waited. Another knock. Slowly he approached. The knob was ice cold under his fingers. He flung the door open. No one. Just the forest. Dense, watching. But there at the foot of the door was the guest book. Closed, clean, as if it had never been moved. He picked it up with trembling hands. The cover was warm to the touch, as if someone had just placed it there. Inside, his entry was still the last one, but now it had been edited. Beneath his handwriting, Someone had added in neat block letters, "You shouldn't be here." He slammed it shut. Something primal in him screamed to leave, to drive until the trees disappeared behind him. But instead, he grabbed the map and flashlight and stepped outside. Toward the second X, toward the part of the woods the cabin didn't want him to see. Ethan stepped off the porch and onto the path that wound away from the cabin. The faded map clutched tightly in his left hand, his flashlight in the right. The trail didn't exist on any GPS, yet his feet found it instinctively, like his body remembered what his mind did not. The deeper he went into the woods, the more the air shifted, colder, denser, as if saturated with something invisible and alive. The branches above twisted unnaturally, like they were leaning in to listen, or worse, to whisper. At first, the path was clear, too clear, as if someone, or something, had prepared it for him. The underbrush was flattened, the mud undisturbed, as though no animal dared to tread here. Birds had stopped singing. Leaves didn't rustle. The only sound was his own breathing and the occasional creak of strained wood underfoot. Then, he started to see the signs, markings carved into tree trunks in a language he didn't know but felt like he should. One looked like a twisted version of the letter E. Another resembled a closed eye. The flashlight flickered. He slapped it gently and moved on, but the path now began to curve, despite the map showing a straight line. And the farther he walked, the more uncanny it became. A rusted tricycle lay half buried in the moss. A child's mitten, stiff with age, clung to a tree branch. He passed a sign that read, "No trespassing." Though it was so warped by time, it looked more like a warning than a law. The second X on the map grew closer. His pulse quickened. Eventually, he reached a clearing. At the center stood an old, weather-worn structure, part shed, part bunker, covered in ivy and slanted at a strange angle, like the earth had tried to swallow it. Its door was slightly ajar. As Ethan approached, he noticed something scratched into the wood in sharp, chaotic gouges. "You were here first." His stomach dropped. The message wasn't for someone else. It was for him. Inside, the air was stale and thick with mildew. Dust hung in beams of thin light that poured through broken slats in the walls. He swept his flashlight across shelves lined with strange objects: an old typewriter with no keys, a stack of VHS tapes with no labels, a broken mirror wrapped in cloth. In the far corner, he found a wooden crate, nailed shut. Something about it repelled him, but he pried it open anyway. Inside was a stack of photographs, all of him, in different places. Some in front of buildings he didn't recognize, some with people he didn't know. But his face, it was always the same. Same shirt, same expression. And in every one of them, he was staring directly at the camera. The last photo in the stack showed him standing in front of the cabin. Today. Same clothes, same weather, same posture. And in the background of the photo, the window behind him showed a face, not his. His hands trembled. He dropped the photos and stumbled out of the bunker, breathing hard, cold sweat clinging to his neck. The woods didn't look the same anymore. The trees had shifted. The path was gone. Or maybe it had never existed at all. He turned in circles, the map now unreadable in his hands. The ink bled and smudged like it wanted to forget what it once revealed. A sound. Behind him, a branch snapping. He turned. No one. But from the direction of the cabin, a soft, distant hum began to rise, like static from an old television. It wasn't coming from a device. It was in the air. A low frequency that rattled the bones. And he realized something deeply wrong. He hadn't come out here to find the truth. He'd come to remember it. Ethan ran. Not toward the cabin, He couldn't tell where that was anymore, but away from the face in the photograph, from the sense that he wasn't alone and worse, had never been. Branches clawed at his arms, slicing through his sleeves as if the forest were trying to stop him. Every path he tried twisted back into itself, circling him like a predator with infinite patience. The sound, that humming, that bone-deep static, followed him, grew louder. It wasn't in his ears, it was in his teeth, his spine, his thoughts. He stumbled into another clearing, smaller this time, moonlight pouring like milk through the trees. In the middle stood something that made his stomach lurch. An old well. Stone walls covered in moss, the bucket long gone, the rope frayed and curled like something dead. It should have felt mundane, but it pulsed with familiarity. He approached slowly, peered inside. Only darkness. Then a sound, faint, like breathing. His, but from below. He stepped back. His flashlight sputtered and died. He smacked it again. Nothing. Then a whisper right behind him. "Why did you lie?" Ethan spun around. No one. He turned back to the well. Something had been placed at its edge, a tape recorder. Old, covered in dust, but its red light blinked softly, like a heartbeat. He pressed play. Static at first, then a voice. His voice. "I came back. I had to see if it was real. I don't remember leaving, but I know I did. I can't tell what was the dream and what was the memory anymore. She said I promised I'd forget, but I never agreed to this." The recording stopped. Ethan stood frozen, trying to reconcile what he had just heard. Was it a prank? A delusion? He didn't even remember recording anything. But the voice was his, weary, distant, like someone who'd been wandering for years. Suddenly, the forest opened up in front of him. A path, lit by lanterns, small, glass ones, swinging gently from hooks hammered into the trees. It looked man-made, controlled, intentional. He followed it. The air thickened. The humming receded. He felt watched, but not threatened. More like observed, studied. The path ended at a small structure, not the cabin, but something like it. Familiar layout, but the wood was older, rotting. Like a version of the same place, years decayed. He entered cautiously. Inside were objects from his childhood, a baseball glove, a ceramic owl his mother had kept on a shelf, a Polaroid of him at 8 years old, the exact photo that had once sat on his childhood nightstand. How did it get here? He sank to the floor. This place wasn't just replicating familiarity. It knew him, remembered him. Or maybe it was his own memory, piecing itself back together. In the center of the room was a large framed photo turned face down. He picked it up. It was a group picture, a family gathering, everyone smiling. In the center, Ethan, surrounded by people he didn't recognize, but who all shared his eyes, his nose, his exact manner of smiling. He dropped the frame. The glass shattered. A whisper rose from every corner of the room. "You were supposed to forget." He staggered out of the structure, breath ragged, eyes wide. The path behind him vanished like smoke. He was back in the woods. Somewhere far behind, the cabin lights flickered on. Not because someone was inside, because someone had been waiting for him to come back. Ethan lurched through the trees, half running, half stumbling, until the cabin silhouette re-emerged between the pines. The porch light flickered, triggered by a motion sensor he swore had been broken the night before. As he stepped onto the boards, they groaned, not with age, but under fresh weight. Someone had been here, maybe still was. Inside, the fireplace crackled. a kettle whistled. His pulse spiked. He'd left no fire, no water. On the table where the guest book had first unnerved him sat a single Polaroid, fresh, glossy, edges still curling from chemical heat. The photo showed his back as he stared at the well only an hour earlier, flashlight haloing his shape. The caption at the bottom, written in thick black marker, read, "You found it." Breath hitching, he spun toward the bedroom. Drawers were open, clothes rifled, the small safe he'd brought, empty. The map, the matchbook, the strange photograph of him with strangers, all gone. Only the tape recorder remained, reels still warm. New tape. He pressed play. "You're almost there, Ethan. One more step and it all clicks back into place." His own voice, yet different, steadier, older, determined. "I had to break you out of the loop. Had to push until you looked in the well, followed the lanterns, remembered why you came here the first time." A pause, then softer. "Look under the floorboards. It's time." Heart hammering, he knelt by the hearth. The first loose plank came up in seconds. Beneath lay a shallow compartment and a battered leather journal, its cover initialed EC, his initials. Inside, dates spanning 7 summers, each entry repeating the same phrase on the last page: "Stay, forget, start again." Suddenly, a footstep creaked behind him. He pivoted, flashlight trembling, illuminating a man standing in the doorway. Mid-30s, wool jacket, tired eyes. His face, or almost, a slightly older version, same scar near the brow, same wary posture. "Ethan," the stranger said, voice low. "I waited as long as I could. Each year you left, forgot, and booked the cabin again. I kept the loop safe until your divorce cracked it open. You were supposed to heal here, not dig." He lifted a hand, no weapon, just weariness. "But you kept hurting yourself and bringing me back with you." Memories flashed like shards. The marital fights, the first impulsive trip to the woods, the breakdown, the desperate pact he'd recorded for himself. Lock the world away, return each year, live a quiet week of peace, and erase the pain before it resurfaced. The stalker was no stranger. He was the version of Ethan who never left, caretaker of the illusion. "I burned the old cabin 2 winters ago when your mind started slipping," the other Ethan continued, stepping closer. "Thought if I erased enough clues you'd stop coming. But you did, over and over. I signed the guest book so the owners wouldn't wonder why the same booking kept appearing." He gestured to the journal. "I begged you, stay, forget, start again." Ethan staggered back. "You can't be real." "I'm as real as the part of you that refuses to move on," the caretaker said quietly. "But tonight, you broke the loop yourself. So I'll fade. And you'll finally remember everything." Firelight dimmed. The caretaker's outline flickered, like a film frame skipping, then was gone, leaving only a faint warmth where he'd stood. Ethan sank to the floor, journal clutched to his chest. Outside, dawn bled pale red between pines. No humming, no footsteps, only wind. He gathered what little he owned, nothing more, and walked the gravel road until Bars returned to his phone. He called no one. 1 month later, a real estate ad went live. Isolated cabin for sale, owner relocating permanently. Ethan never reread the journal. He mailed it to himself in the city, sealed and marked, "Open only if the forest calls again." It sat in a safe he hoped he'd never reopen. And each night, as he lay in a new apartment buzzing with city noise, he whispered a single promise: no more loops.